Hello, everyone, and welcome to GoT Thrones, a Game of Thrones podcast, which has returned. I'm your host, Alexandra August, and with me, as ever, is my co-host, Johnny Kolazinski.
Hi, folks. You're seeing me, I think, for the first time in us actually doing something with video after, 10 years of podcasting. It's the 90s. It's great.
And with us, joining us today is Eliana of one of my favorite, A Song of Ice and Fire and literary podcast, Girls Gone Canon.
Hello, thank you for having me here. I was planning, in the first take, I was like, what sound effect am I gonna make? That's how Johnny introduced himself. I was like, what? I was like, I don't know. Something from the heart. So.
And you did, you deliver. I thank you very much. You are already making me delighted that I asked you and that you were able to join. So thank you. As for basically what we'd like to talk about this week is the state of sort of Game of Thrones, the state of the franchise, the series that are in play, and then kind of just what to think about as we dive back into this fandom or try to dive back into this fandom again with A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. So maybe we can start. Eliana, do you want to share what you've been up to since the end of Thrones?
Yeah, so I mean, we've never left. We've never left Westeros. The Girls Gone Canon podcast that I co-host with Chloe, we still are doing our reread of the books, which is a POV by POV reread. So, in the books, we chunk up all of the one character's POVs. And honestly, crazily enough, we've finally reached the last POV. We are going to be starting Tyrion soon. But I think back then, yeah, the very last POV, we just finished up Daenerys, and then took a little break. We're quickly revisiting the Hedge Knight, which is kind of how our podcast got started. In 2017. So I think, just started, the cast in time for the last season of Game of Thrones and maybe the last two seasons, and then covered those as it was coming out. And then we did both our usual podcast and House of the Dragon at the same time, and then we realized we're so tired. We're so old. And now we only do, during show season, we only do one at a time, and it'll be maybe 2 days rehashing what happened in the episode and our takes and whatnot.
Johnny and I had a similar kind of discovery of burnout our first couple seasons, because I think when we first started podcasting, it was season 5, and we simply did not stop for 18 months.
Yeah.
We did a rewatch and a reread in the off season, because I was like, well, if there's nobody podcasting the off season, well, then we're going to pick up all of those. And there's nobody podcasting the off season because people don't want to listen to Game of Thrones podcasts. I mean, they do,
Yeah.
but not as many as I. And then I think we went to Comic-Con in 2016,
Mm-hmm.
and then did not speak to each other for 3 months or something.
It was too
Had to stop.
much. It was too much.
Sometimes you need a whole fiscal quarter, I guess, to not talk to your co-host.
But I definitely have not been as active a fan since I stopped podcasting, I suppose.
I was all over
Which,
the show subreddit and the Free Folk subreddit and all of those, any deep dive, I was all about. And then show ended, and I think within 3 weeks I stepped back a bit.
so 6 years on, it feels like, from the Thrones ending, has the extra historical context kind of changed your immediate responses to the finale?
And this is very fresh, and so I'm not going to give any spoilers to it, but I'm thinking of the last season differently after seeing the last season of Stranger Things, where they did a very similar, we're going to do few episodes there, but we're going to toss money at them, toss time at them. The internet might disagree with me, but I think that Things did a much better job of, if not sticking the landing, and not Carrie Scruggsing it and breaking their ankle. It does really feel to me like there was a little bit more cohesive planning and forethought put into how we're going to make this last season worth what we're putting into it financially.
Yeah, I also just finished watching the last season of Stranger Things, and I agree. I think that they hit the ending much better. And I think that, like, that one I was also much more like ready to let go of, and the show itself so obviously changed over time, and the writing itself changed over time, that to some extent I was like, this is a wildly different show than the one I first started. I didn't even like I don't remember if they have less episodes or not. I'd have to check how many there were in the pre, but I was like, this is a wildly different show. They brought in concepts that had never been introduced before, but whatever. I just let go. I think since the ending of Game of Thrones, do I approach some media differently? Yeah, I think I kind of just let go of some things, but also the ending of Game of Thrones, I have always been a little bit of a hater in this. I say I loved the ending of Game of Thrones because it justified all of my hating earlier on, of being like, you guys, I don't think that they really fleshed this out well. I don't think that they actually like built up a foundation or earned this season's finale. And like previous seasons, they're like, you just hate it because you read the books and it's not in the things from the books are in it. I'm like, but like, was I
Mm,
right? Yes.
mm,
Turns out I was
mm.
right the whole time.
As
And
long as I'm
that's it.
right, then
Am I just
I
spiteful? Yeah.
I listen, anything that comes under right is negotiable. Okay. Like you can call me spiteful and I'll be like, okay, but I'm right. That's, spiteful is an opinion. Spiteful is, right is objective. The Game of Thrones finale, I was generally positive on it, if only because I thought that what we did not have in production value in the first like 2 to 3 seasons, but did have in story, that ratio kind of flip-flopped. And I thought we had just this spectacular TV, a fantasy that the likes like I was not a Lord of the Rings person, so I feel like the wonder that people felt at Peter Jackson's series, I got to feel in just watching all of this happen on television and the denouement of this excitement. And having watched Stranger Things, I was pretty deeply satisfied by most of that and was very impressed by most of that. I think it's tough with both of them because I don't know if what I would have wanted more, if what I wanted more was a more thoroughly written and thoroughly earned, or just 10 episodes of the last 7 and 8, or the last like season 7 and 8. If we could have had 10 episodes, I don't know if I would have wanted that with like 2.5 years between seasons,
Yeah.
or what we had, which was momentum and which was pretty fun because that momentum, I feel like, was one of the last times we've had a tangible monoculture, or just one of the last times I was part of a really tangible monoculture. And it was really joyful for so much of it and so fun. I'm kind of something that I also have found curious just as I was thinking about what to talk about today. The media ecosystem is so wildly different than
Yeah.
it was because Thrones premiered, what, 2011, 2010? I'm curious to know if the impact of it will be softened by the dense population of TV surrounding it or content surrounding it.
Yeah, I
And also
agree. I
how,
do
like,
kind of
Night of the Seven Kingdoms is gonna live with such a shorter runtime and a shorter set of seasons in a much more populated, or what feels, I don't know. Yeah, sorry to cut you off, but
no problem. That's helpful. Yeah, I don't know. I think it depends on also like House of the Dragon ends. I think like to an extent it also depends on like how the books end too. But like, I do get concerned about like the machine that like keeps putting so much stuff out there. Like, of is it going to be good or not? And honestly, and we'll get to this like later. I am optimistic about A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, but like what happens when we reach that third season, right? Like, and afterwards. And I think what's been cool though about Game of Thrones is like there's a bunch of shows out there that like I don't know that this would have ever been made had Game of Thrones not existed. But also at the same time, when we talk about it being purchased by certain like, by like Netflix, like HBO being purchased by Netflix, I'm also like, will something like this ever get made again? Because I have shows that I loved, like Sense8 and the OA, that were canceled long before they should have ever been canceled. So I'm like, what? A
the
risk was
OA.
taken to make Game of Thrones, right? and it paid off for them for 7 seasons and paid off for them still. Like, I mean, like House of the Dragon had what? Like a huge opening episode viewership as far as I remember. So,
it was an incredible lead in, and it also I think opened up the world of I feel like the fandom has always existed on the internet. It's always existed at conventions, and I know that there's a lot of pop culture that has made things that has made mainstream culture geek culture, but I feel like Game of Thrones hit that bullseye. Speaking of,
If I can kind of add,
Johnny was kind of
one of my hopes slash concerns is something that we've been seeing so much that was not the case when Thrones was airing, that really transitioned with streaming, is not just the shorter seasons but the multi-year gaps between them that kills momentum. Going back to what we were all saying uh, about having our podcasts and keeping them going during the off season, it's really hard to do that if you're going to have the 2.5 years like we do between the seasons of Severance, for example. Um, Especially when you add shorter seasons onto that. And I think that along with the so much more media that's available, so much more targeted genre media. There's so much fantasy, so much science fiction, so much international stuff that's available now, is going to be another roadblock in having a show become a monocultural sensation in the same way.
yeah, I think that's really interesting too when like also you think about what I'm not watching this show yet, but I hear what Pluribus, I
Yeah,
think, or something is supposed to have like 3 years in between seasons. I didn't realize Severance was 2.5. Maybe that was the most recent one. Now I just realized I was like, am I about to wait 2.5 years for season three? And like maybe. And I think that's a good point of how it changes and kills momentum. And I think, like part of why Thrones was coming out at the pace that it was is like we started out with child actors, and that was obviously the case too for Stranger Things, right? Like, how does this all change as like your actors get older, but you're also thinking about like it's a balance between on one hand I'm like, yeah, if it's gonna lead to like great art, sure, like let's let them have that amount of time, but at the same time, what is the time limit on great art? There is a subtext here in regards to this conversation. There's a subtext um, for our series that we follow, but also like what do those contracts look like? We're talking about like this is a production, right?
so I don't I'm cute I'm kind of with you because like typically British actors don't work, they do not have a contract extension. I forget what the name is. So you have to get options. They don't typically theatrical actors in the UK do not want options because they are not typically like actors in the UK aren't on contract. It's how Matthew leaves Downton Abbey, like at a really inopportune time to go do Legion, which I appreciated for myself. But if they're, I don't know what I'm, that's a good point to bring up. I'm really curious as to what these deals look like, especially for certain people on this show whose characterization and at a certain age is key.
yeah. We don't want Egg to be
And like,
taller
I
than
don't,
Duncan the Tall.
right, right. And like also now we have shows like that are this format, like shows like Slow Horses that film back to back 6 episode seasons. And so they can release season one and season two within a fairly short amount of time of one another. And then you take one. I don't know that they would copy that model, but I don't know, given, and we can chat about this as we move into Hot D, given the relatively low tech comparatively production that this is, there's far less, if any, magic. And I want to know how they're spending their money because they don't. Yeah, that'll be curious to see because it lacks a lot of bells and whistles that other thrones have had. So I wonder, in terms of pacing, if all that will hopefully have a beneficial impact on when this show gets out and how quickly it goes season to season.
I'm mistaken in thinking that they've already started also recording the second season because of exactly what you flagged in regards to Egg's actor. I
But
could be wrong.
and especially with like I do not think that anybody in that executive office is putting any faith in George finishing the series. I'm curious to know how they plan on solving that problem if there's no more George stuff. There's no more written work.
Do you think there's like less of a problem when it comes to, I guess, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms? If they wanted to call it after like 3 seasons, they can. Um, they don't have to. Like, we don't know how much of a time skip there would be between like the Mystery Night and what would have been the She-Wolves of Winterfell. We don't know. Like, for all we know, Egg's an adult, so like they would have like, or like a teenager. We don't know,
Sure.
and so it could be fine. It could not be fine.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. Has anything like in terms of any other shows kind of scratching the itch of Game of Thrones in its absence, I feel like we're all sort of like a lot of people that I've spoken to who were huge Game of Thrones fans are not so much for Hot D, and it's not because it's bad, but it's I think a lot of people have the opinion that myself and Johnny sort of have, which is I don't
It's not
it's
fun.
really hitting a lot of the same notes that we just left off, and that was like a really emotional like ringer. And yeah, it's not fun. It's deeply serious immediately, and I feel like they want I don't know I'm curious to know how you have how like you Eliana as an emotion as just a viewer of Game of Thrones, how Hot D has landed with you for the past couple of seasons.
So I've actually loved it, and so has Chloe. We've actually really enjoyed a lot of House of the Dragon. There's some changes that we're like questioning how it's going to turn out, and I know that George has also expressed like his disgruntlement, but we're like about Maelor. That's what you got mad about, but I think it's he wasn't able to do so. I don't know. These are all my theories. You can take these all, but like
I know George, it's
he,
George has broken embargo and shared stuff
yeah,
about
I
like
think
I kind
he
of love that he takes that, yeah.
he was there are all these things that maybe he didn't feel like he could
Uh,
voice perhaps the first time, and he's like, I'm not gonna let that happen again. I don't know. And like, I know some people feel upset about some of the changes, but I do really love that House of the Dragon, for the most part, especially the first season, feels like such a character driven show. And that's what I
mm.
strongly believe was missing from Game of Thrones from seasons like 3 onwards. Yes, I'm starting at 3. It became a very plot driven show. Like, I mean, arguably even season 2, but anyways. Um, it
Shots
became a
fired.
plot driven show
I
as
think you
opposed
have
to, yeah. Go ahead.
it was deeply satisfying to me on a plot in a plot way. But you're right, in characterization, it was extremely unearned in a lot of ways. And I felt with Hot D, I enjoy production value. I enjoy expensive looking dragons, and I really beautiful dragons they create. And I really enjoyed Eve Best coming up from the ground in her dragon. And I enjoy like the fact that we get to see it's kind of cool to see them to see the Targaryens we've been talking about for so long on Game of Thrones and to see them at their full power and to kind of it honestly I will say like that sort of like softens the blow of Game of Thrones the end of the blow because I my heart was broken about Daenerys. It was I know Chloe saw that coming like a mile away. I thought they were building her to be kind of like an Elizabeth the First allegory, and it really bummed me out when they make the probably best decision overall for killing a despot with a super weapon, but it was still a bummer. And it's kind of though it is sort of nice to have it be like it doesn't really get any better. Like when the dragons were here, it was not it's still pretty precarious, and this overall you shouldn't put all the power in one person. It doesn't end well.
Yeah. I don't know. I think I have mixed feelings about that. I mean, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, I'm happy about being adapted. I've liked the trailers because it feels a lot like, it reminds you of things that you grew up with, like A Knight's Tale, right? Which R.I.P. Heath Ledger, and also my
Shannon's list.
favorite piece of like a Game of Thrones spinoff, which was Medieval Land Funtime World from Bad Lip Reading. I've wanted that show to exist for the longest time, and it gives me that sort of vibe.
Oh, by the way, everyone, we're gonna highlight when we talk about spoilers for A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. I'll put a spoiler warning at the top of the episode, so hopefully you already saw it. But be careful. We've read the books. And you don't know where to find us on socials right now because I didn't announce it.
And going to what you said, Eliana, about character versus plot driven. One thing that has me excited for it is the fact that the stakes are very high for the characters, but we're not looking at uh, world changing. Everything is going to be so impactful to the world. Everything that this war must happen and things like that. It is something that to me feels like is going to be very character focused.
Yeah, like I agree with that, and also especially I think the second story feels so much more like darker to me than the first
Mhm.
one, like the Sworn Sword. I'm like, wow, everything's big sad here. And everything is big sad at the opening of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, like in this story as well. A lot of things happen, trying to keep it. But something that I'm curious about because I feel like this was highlighted in Game of Thrones, the show, but it's something that I've really come to appreciate more upon rereading the series is how much this is like a story about PTSD and, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. I don't think this is like a spoiler because it technically happens all before. It is
Sir
like a lot
Arlen
of
dies.
people. Oh yeah, that too. Sir Roland dies, but also like it's in the aftermath of like another civil war, right? Another very
Right.
big civil war called the Blackfire Rebellion. That, same as how like House of the Dragon. I assume you all assume, even if you haven't seen spoilers, that it's going to become a civil war based off of how the show is going, everyone.
Yeah.
And that, that really kind of broke a lot of people's idea of civility and what trust looks like. And so we're kind of opening up the story on that. It's like about a similar time span, like, I don't know, about 15-ish years from like the time span between when we opened Game of Thrones and Robert's Rebellion. So what does it look like, especially because, we're focusing also on these very young characters, but it's a much smaller scale rebellion. Oh, not rebellion. It's a smaller scale war to some extent than Robert's rebellion. Doesn't necessarily lead to a dynastic change. Um, so
It
yeah.
feels it feels like with Game of Thrones rebuilt relationships either for them to be torn asunder and then rebuilt, or relationships were built so someone could die or betray you, or, just really it was a lot of it was the art of exquisite tragedy. Game of Thrones, and especially with how people related to one another. And it feels like rereading The Hedge Knight, it's a lot of Dunk just trying to find people and get them to buy in. And it's nice to see someone not seeking vengeance, not seeking redemption, not seeking, safety from trauma necessarily, but or it's not seeking release from trauma necessarily, but just just on and about to find a life and on a journey that's not necessarily impossible to start. And it's a more yeah, I like that.
I thought you were gonna say he's just going out there with his pitch, going to a bunch of execs. He's like,
Oh,
"Hello,
sharks!
I'm a knight. Here's
That
my
is kind
pitch.
of
Buy my show."
it. He's going out to market.
Yeah, his sales. He's like, "Hello." You get that email, like, "Are you looking for a knight?"
ISO, Hedge Knight. It feels like a lot of us are excited for the tone of this to be lighter in general. And is that like, I know, Johnny, you have spoken about the world build, like just kind of getting to sit and like have this dense world to explore a little bit with A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot more of the underside's not quite the right term, but we're seeing the equivalent of like the Brotherhood without banners, and if not the small folks, the middle class of Westeros. And I think that that's a very interesting perspective to have in a world like this, in any feudal society. And so I'm kind of excited to see something that isn't, even though we are obviously, and but this is where spoilers are going to come in from me. We are seeing the next king of Westeros, but we're not seeing him as the king of Westeros. We're seeing him as the squire to the lowliest knight the Seven Kingdoms has ever seen.
But like also the high, like
Mhm.
Ironic that you use the word lowly. He's so
He
high.
is.
Be
Be
tall.
tall.
And yeah. Okay, and then okay, so for I think at this point is a good chance to transition to behind the spoiler curtain.
Before you go into spoilers, let me just quickly say, I think that for
Mhm.
me, the biggest drawback for A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is like, I love the title. Obviously, it's the title of like the compiled three short stories or novellas, but it doesn't have the same ring to it as saying something like hot D. Like, what am I supposed to say? Akotakasika. Like, what do I say for this acronym? What are we gonna do? Like, you had got thrones, right? Like that worked out great for you, but what are we gonna do?
I've been trying to make K7K happen, but I feel like that works in writing. It doesn't, that might work for a hashtag, but I don't think it works for just, going about town. A Night of the
Yeah.
Seven Kingdoms is a mouthful.
Isn't K7K like Ozempic and tirzepatide? Isn't that what they are?
Well, that's quite interesting timing as well.
The pharmaceutical companies are in bed with fantasy media.
I mean, they're not.
Probably. Just look at all the names. Beautiful commercials.
Tyrion might be right for
Now I
you.
want to work for. Oh man. Strong increase
That's
in
how I feel
alcohol
watching.
cravings. Sorry, side effects.
Yeah, that's how I feel watching what like Amazon shows now. I'm like, oh my god, I forgot commercials.
Wah! Maybe we'll come up with a transition for this. And this is a spoilers all section. So we are book readers. We've seen two of us are completists for Hot D. So tread with caution. Turn it off. Turn it off now if you don't want to listen. Turn it off. Okay. All right. I'm excited to see Egg's shiny head. I mean, I've already seen it, but I think he looks really cute. And my nephew is 8 years old, and he is not a prince, and he is not in as much danger. But I am far more emotionally connected to Egg as a child than I was to, like, say, Bran.
Yeah, I haven't thought about it, but yeah, I guess also because like I don't know, Brand was competing with a lot of other kids. There were a
Yeah.
lot of other kids, but
I are
But who had a better story than Bran the Broken? Oh, right, everyone.
I was like, gonna quote like anyone, even the cook. But anyways, but I think he has a good story in the books. But anyways, I also don't think they should have done that line. But anyways, it was not the best line
that's
to
the
pick.
I don't know that Bran needed like a I don't know that he needed a name. I don't know that it needed to be Bran.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the line. That's the name I would call like him to his face. I mean, he would
Yeah.
know if you called him that anyway. But like, just don't do it to his face, you know. Um. Well, like Ed gets an interesting name, right? Like he gets an interesting name later on. It's a neutral name. It's not the most positive of the epithets, but it's not the worst.
If I had to pick, I would take unlikely over the broken, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. Or
Just
even
I
over
would like
unworthy. Yeah, the
there we
previous
go.
Aegon was like the unworthy, and I'm like, yeah.
Who gets to call you the unworthy while you're alive? Like that's especially if you're a Targaryen king. I want
Yeah.
I'm excited to just kind of experience the tournament of it and to
Mhm.
kind of see like sort of the tone they're approaching with this because we've not again, it's just sort of deep into a moment of Westeros as opposed to covering so much ground in Westeros. So
I mean, the first, what, first episode, somewhere in probably the first 20 minutes, we saw a tournament. And I think, well, no, then we also had Joffrey. So there were other ones. But uh, instead of something that was a small moment in episodes or a set dressing, having the entire first season be built around just this locale, this event, um, not having Westeros spanning plot lines and episodes that are happening over the courses of weeks. Like that's something that's exciting to me.
That's a good point. This story does take place over like a much shorter time span of days. So like when we get 6 episodes, it's not
Hmm.
because it's happening weeks apart. It's like hours
Yeah.
apart.
And they're 30-minute episodes, so is like, when is Baylor gonna die? I guess that's my question.
It could be like right at the very end of the penultimate episode, in the way that it was with, I don't know that that was the penultimate, but like the way that they did it at the end of an episode for um King Viserys the
Mhm.
First.
Yeah.
Um and I thought that was like very beautifully done. With Baylor, it has to be like a little unceremonious, and then you have the ceremony in the next part, and I guess like the
I can
aftermath,
hear
and then
it.
yeah, Makar being like, I didn't mean to kill my brother. I'm like, shut the fuck up, Makar. I mean, I really don't think he did. I'm sorry, I don't know if we can
It's
curse. I
just
don't think he
not like
did, but
I don't think he did. I like
he's
I think it's
annoying.
I don't have a lot of patience for people who have everything they could ever possibly want and are still like chronically unhappy, which is feels like that energy. But his son is way worse.
I don't, that's why
That's
I'm just like, go away, Makar.
I just what if the episode just ends with like the slap of his brain on the ground?
I did think it, but I don't know. I mean, like, I guess when they're going for a different tone, they could. That is kind of actually more Game of Thrones tone than it would be Hot D. Like, I would not be surprised. But also for someone like so built up like Baylor, yeah, I don't know.
Anything else that you are, Chani, is there anything else that like you are super looking forward to?
We talked about it before one on one, but I think we're both looking forward to Steely Pate.
Steely Pate and the Fossaways. The
Hmm.
Fossaway dynamic I'm excited
The
about.
ways.
They
I
just seem like yeah.
I love the Fossaways. I'm excited to see them. I'm excited to see also a lot more like I'm hoping we get more information on Dorne than the way that like it was necessarily like portrayed in the show, because I think this is a really interesting time for Dorne in regards to the Seven Kingdoms. Like at during House of the Dragon, Dorne is still a separate like nation, entirely a separate kingdom, right? A lot of the aftermath of when we're setting A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and I heard we're probably going to get more Dornish information, is it's like a few years, like a few decades after the Dornish have become part of the Seven Kingdoms. And I kind of wonder if
That's
that's why
right.
Baelor Breakspear is such like a nice guy, because he doesn't look like the way they think Targaryens would look. He's coming at this looking very Dornish. He looks very, his mother probably got a lot of crap at court for being Dornish, right? That was part of the impetus for the start of the Blackfire Rebellion that led to all this stuff. So he ends up like really learning like, hey, maybe humility is like important, because people were mean to my mom, they were mean to me, a lot of xenophobia like there. We see the way that Ares the Second spoke about, I mean, his own daughter-in-law, his own like grandchildren, arguably probably with Elia, and
Hmm.
with Rhaenys, his granddaughter. And so like how does that impact also the setting here? We have Tansel too tall, like she's supposed to be Dornish as well, right? And that's part of what Arion is reacting to. He's like, oh, this is anti-Targaryen. And like it wouldn't be crazy to think that those sympathies might exist amongst the Dornish when they've had for so long resisted becoming part of the Seven Kingdoms and now are.
And I think kind of look at that as just the way with like there's always going to be in any kind of transfer and anybody who holds power, it always might be the wrong person. It always might be somebody who's wildly too tempted once they get on board to not misuse it for their own gain. But just as though there will always be people like that, there will always be people who are measured. And I cannot wait to see the scene between Baylor and Dunk. Well, Johnny called it Dunk's arraignment, where like he just, with the respect of human to human, breaks down like, okay, here's what's happening. I know it's not your fault. I know like you are not he gets above the obvious. Like Dunk's not a threat. Dunk like none of this is Dunk did not do the wrong thing, but this is the world we live in. and my responsibility is to the greater stability of everything, and right, and this is how we have to go through this or else it's just going to be a mess. Or I forget how he ends that, but it was just such a it's very Star Trek: The Next Generation of me for like a big point to be like just reasoned out in a conference room to be like, all right, what do we do about this? Well, let's talk it out.
Yeah, especially because I guess the Baylor's like, let's talk it out, and he's like, I just don't know how well the talking is gonna go for you. So then the conclusion is, let's fight it
Hmm.
out. And I think that to an extent, you're talking about the tourney, and it will be really fun to see it. Like when I was rereading, a couple of questions that I have that I'll bring up in a second, but like it feels very much like a sports game. Like I think George finally got to write the sports game that he wanted to write, like that first breaking of the tourney, and I'm like, this feels like what I every time I watched football, which is not like many, but I aspire to one day be a person who watches more football. When they come together, like the snapping back of the
The
football and then like
scrimmage.
they all like collide. Yeah, the scrimmage. Yes. But
I don't
you
know if
don't
that's the
have
right word.
I thought a scrimmage was like a practice, but I don't know.
It can be.
I learn from other people. They tell me things, and yeah, and George is he's really into his sports, and I also kind of wonder if so it was easy with House of the Dragon of like, are you for the blacks or the greens, right? And with Game of Thrones, they really played up the different houses that you could support. And they're like obviously like kind of two sides in A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, but not in the same way. Like you can't use that same marketing almost
Yeah.
Yeah.
choose play for A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms that you could for Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon.
God, that's right.
Yeah. There's definitely
That,
right and wrong in a way that, yeah, there were bad guys in Game of Thrones, but there were also competing good guys.
there were competing good guys. The more that we talk about this, I'm so intrigued as to how people are going to receive this being really Dunk's story, and we are seeing things. And the premise of this story, sort of the structure of it, is that we are seeing Westeros through the eyes of a small, small, small person, and he gets to see a lot of things because of just the nature of this tournament and the fact that, like, we're not operating on 21st century security levels, and he's a big, tall man. But the fact that we are not in the brain of Baylor Breakspear, and we don't have we only have so much limited visibility and accessibility to what's going on in the royal sort of courts of Westeros and what all the moving pieces are, that I'm really intrigued as to how the audience is going to receive this different format.
Yeah, I mean Baylor Breakspear is not even in the brain of Baylor Breakspear anymore, so.
Baylor. Baylor Brain Spear.
Whoa, that one's pretty good. I haven't heard. Oh, sad.
I
But
apologize.
I know it's okay. I started.
I think that's kind of, I don't know, that's a lot of what I wanted to cover. I'm in general extremely excited about this just because it seems like I don't know, Stranger Things was kind of a drag a little bit. Like it was happy, but it was very emotional. I'm excited for Hot Will, but this looks like a good story outside of what I know to be coming, and just like namaste for everyone who watches. Like people are going to be, do you think people are going to be mad? People are going to be mad about Baylor
Yeah.
Breakspear.
I think they'll be happy to be mad, right?
Hmm. Yeah, do you think
I
there'll
don't
be
know.
some nostalgia with that feeling of like that sort of Ned Stark betrayal?
Yeah. Like I don't think that they'll be mad. They'll be like, ooh, feelings, like, but in a good way.
Crossing my fingers for those who are a channel.
Yeah, it'll be, I don't think it's going to put people off the experience, but I definitely was like, there was definitely a, because I had read it and forgotten that. And then I also was like, of course, George, but of course, this man does not exist for very long. And Jordan's just not how, we're never going to see the story of Jaehaerys and Alysanne because it was probably pretty boring. They're too
I think
nice.
that's the That's is it? I think it's actually I think that's the one. I would actually love to see that one adapted
It's
because that one's
wild.
so character driven. It's just about it's a soap opera about a mother whose children keep dying.
That's true. Oh my gosh, that is her children do keep dying.
The biggest villain in the story is just like family, but not in the Civil War kind of way. I'm also just watching Dawson's Creek for the first time, and the show would be vastly improved without Dawson. And anyways, the story is about just feelings. Alex knows this about me because I'm posting my Dawson's thoughts. Um,
Listen, I enjoy media criticism. So I enjoyed watching your Dawson slots and contributing the only
yeah,
thing I ever contribute to any Dawson's Creek situation. Yeah. Yeah, overall I think yeah, I'm excited to see how this all plays out. I'm excited to see how the audience receives it. And I really will be very grateful if we can catch a speck of the Game of Thrones kind of fervor where people like kind of blink for a minute and be like, "Oh yeah, we all used to like this thing and now this thing is a little back." That would be a nice feeling. Maybe it'll fix
I
us.
probably sh
Yeah.
I probably should have asked this earlier. How do you feel about it being, speaking of like timing, released in the same year as House of the Dragon season 3?
Good. Like, I don't think that if I were to make the programming schedules for HBO and I were to structure them as a way that pleased me, a viewer, I would not be this. I would, first of all, have done Night of the Seven Kingdoms first and then did House of the Dragon. Maybe later. I don't know. Maybe I talk like I know stuff. I don't mind that I think they're two wildly different stories. I think they have no bearing on one another. It's kind of like when Walking Dead and Fear the Walking Dead ran at the same time, or when DS9 and TNG ran at the same time, but less so. Like it's just they're not the same. I think they're going to be really different shows. How do you feel about that as podcasters?
Yeah. Do we have a date? I don't know if we have a date yet for Hot D season 3, but
I feel like they would have announced it if it was going to come on the heels of Night of the Seven Kingdoms. I would guess maybe around summertime Comic-Con if they want to hit a date, or maybe New York Comic-Con.
yeah, my guess would
There
be
might
like
be a
I
date
mean
within there.
they usually do around like end of August, but that's true. Like I think what first season was around October, so I guess they're testing it out. They're testing out their lineups and,
Well, and
whatever
like
they're
all the
gonna
lineup,
do. I don't know. Yeah.
and like who knows what they're gonna do? Like who knows if this deal's gonna go through? Who knows if Paramount's gonna win? Who knows? There's a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah,
We just don't look
true.
too far ahead. Yeah. So Eliana, where can we find you and Girls Gone Canon? And are you guys planning on covering Night of the Seven Kingdoms?
Yes. So you can find me and my co-host Chloe, who wants you all to know, this was her request. She wants you all to know that Dunk fucked. All right, I don't know if we can. She wants people to know that Dunk objectively has sex, not in this part of the series, but at some point. And it's important that we acknowledge that she felt that was important to get across. You can find us
Acknowledged.
at King's Gone Canon, that's CANON, our podcast, pretty much anywhere that podcasts are hosted. You can also find us on social media on both Blue Sky and Twitter at, again, Girls Gone Canon, that's CANON. Send us an email if you want at girlsgonecanon@gmail.com. We will be covering A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, but at the moment we are redoing our read through of The Hedge Knight. Episode 1 is out. We released that towards the end of last year. Then we were like, you know what? 2025 was so hard. Life is so hard. So we took a break. And now we're going to be releasing
That's a prayer.
episode 2 to the public on, pull up a calendar, January 9th. And then episode 3 of The Hedge Knight on, which will be the conclusion of it, on January 16th, right in time for the premiere on January 18th. And then we'll just be doing that. And then once that's done, I'm pretty sure we'll pick up on our Tyrion, start our Tyrion read through. And then at some point, we'll do House of the Dragon whenever that's slated to come out.
Good. I'm glad you can simply never set it down.
Yeah. And then George is going to release The Winds of Winter, and we're going to start that read through. Like,
And the rest of Night of the Seven Kingdoms.
yeah,
That's what he said.
he timed it for
Yeah.
us. He told me in a dream, and the other day over coffee together. We did not have coffee together.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure he's just using Girls Gone Canon for
What he
research now,
told
right?
you.
I mean, I don't know about that. I really
I
hope he's
would.
not. I really hope he's not, because I've said some pretty ludicrous things on there. But
Parody Laplace.
yeah, anyways, so
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you providing me with hours upon hours upon hours of free content for most of the time that I've known you. And Johnny, you can find me on social media, not a lot of places anymore. So good luck. You will be able to find the show somewhere. I'm on Instagram, but it's mostly pictures of my cats. Maybe on TikTok at some point. We'll see. Stay tuned. Johnny, who are you?
I'm at Cycloptico, Cycloptiko, but I haven't been posting anything fun. I'm not on Twitter anymore. Threads a bit.
So yeah, good luck. We will be posting obviously we put our, if you're listening to this, you found this episode, so like that's most of the work. Anyway, our plan, and this will continue, is to release content weekly on Sundays. That'll be a live stream immediately reacting to most likely a live stream. We will have immediate reactions up on YouTube and on podcatchers that Sunday night. Our plan, I think, is to release one more episode before the show launches, but stay tuned. We may or we may not. And then we will do, alongside every episode and every immediate reactions show, we will do our customary deep dive.
Yep.
These will all be available on every podcatcher. They will be available on YouTube. They will be available on Spotify, on Apple, on Podbean. If you have your own RSS catcher, it'll be available there, because that's how it works. And thank you guys. If you've come back to this, thank you. Thank you, Brian Kroner. He subscribed, texted me. We'll shout you out. And thanks everyone for participating.
thank you for having me.
Thank you so
It was
much.
fun.
Thanks everyone for your patience. Sorry if this is a little awkward or edited wonkified. It's my first video hosting, and I'm going to be really, really self-conscious as I go through the edit.
No
Talk
problem. I'm
soon.
trusting. I'm trusting. Oh.
Thank you. All right, folks. Thanks, and we will see you. We'll see you in the coming weeks.
Yeah. Bye, folks.